My name is Barnaby and I make and repair guitars in this small workshop near Tokyo, Japan. I do it as a hobby, but I get to do some really fun things. And today somebody has sent me something extremely cool. It's a 1965 Teisco YG6, I think is their serial number. And it's just a gorgeous looking surf guitar. You know, it's kind of beaten up, but it really looks cool. And it's got these amazing pickups in it. It's got this really fun logo here, which I think says Overtop or something in sort of 50s style cursive writing. It's a great retro piece. Now, what I'm going to be doing with this guitar is a restoration. But I'm not going to be restoring it so that it looks like new. That would be a tragedy. We've got these little dings in the back. There are dings on the back of the headstock, all of that stuff. And I don't want any of that to go away. I want that to stay there. That's part of the object's history. But what I will do, I want to make it play like it would have when it was new, or if possible, better than when it was new. And so there are some issues to deal with. The biggest issue of all is the neck. The neck seems to have a warp in it, and also the frets, which are very thin, are worn down to virtually nothing. So this will need to be addressed. I think I'll replace the nut as well. The tuners seem to work okay, the bridge system seems to work okay. There are some problems with the electronics. The tone pot is having some trouble. And so what I'm going to do is first I'll just check all the action and all that sort of stuff, and we'll see what needs doing. Now, running a ruler along, actually it's not as bad as I thought it would be. There's a little bit of rocking going on, but generally speaking, we're only really talking a millimetre or two. So what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to take the neck off and check it out, and I'll find out whether the neck itself needs straightening or whether it can simply be adjusted. So one really interesting thing about this neck I've discovered is that it's actually got a fairly severe back bow. That means that most necks bow this way because of string tension. This one has gone the other way, and I suspect that might be because of an over-tightened truss rod. But the fingerboard is really thick rosewood, so that means that if I need to plane or sand it down, I'm not really going to face any problems with that. I'm not going to run out of rosewood or anything. And it's a beautiful piece. It's got this gorgeous wavy grain. It's actually not looking like Indian rosewood to me. If I had to guess, I would say it was something like jacaranda. It's almost like Brazilian rosewood. Lovely stuff. Okay. Very cool. It's a three-piece neck, I think. It's made of something like Meranti. And our truss rod has really been tightened up a lot. So that fits with my theory that it's an over-tightened truss rod which is actually causing our problem. Let's see if we can loosen that a bit. There's still a little bit of a hump, but it's very small. So what this tells me is that I'm not going to need to bend the neck with heat or anything. All I really need to do is to pull out the frets, flatten the board, and refret. So that should be a fairly straightforward job. Now there's a bit of a trick to removing old frets. First, you can take some lemon oil and just do the board. Lemon oil, by the way, isn't actually made from lemons. It's made from the blood of my defeated enemies. And then, when we've got our lemon oil around the frets, oh, and what a lovely board that is, we take a hot soldering iron and we press the hot soldering iron to our fret, until we get a little bit of bubbling with the lemon oil around the fret. And then we take some flat ground clippers here and we can just start to lift up our fret, sort of work along. If we do it carefully, just make sure that the fret is warm before it comes up. It'll come up with no tear out. So this guitar, 1965, you know, it's sort of 50 years old, and yet the fret came out with no tear out at all using that technique. So now we can see a difference between the fretwire types. Okay, this is an old Teisco piece of fretwire that's just come out, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah, 4 little tangs or barbs on it. This is a piece of modern fretwire, and in the same distance we've got 15 tangs. So Teisco wire is notorious for popping up, it's notorious for having all sorts of problems, and now we know why. It just didn't have as many tangs. So there was not so much holding it in. Now on the guitar, one of these inlays is a bit wonky. So what I'm doing is I'm taking a chisel and I'm neatening up the edge of it. Then what I'm going to do after this is done is I'm going to fill the little gap I've created with rosewood, so that when the inlay is sanded flat and the board is flush, it will just match up nicely. Now for this sort of task I use a kind of water-thin superglue, which is great because it goes into the cracks. It, you know, follows capillary action and stuff. So I'll let that go in there. And when it's sanded flush, it should be completely invisible. Now that dust will fill in any little gaps and mix with the superglue. What I've got here is a radius block. I've turned it upside down and I've put it into this vise. And I take my neck, I turn it over, and this radius block is the same radius as the neck, okay? It's a 12-inch radius. And all I do is I simply work the neck up and down. And I'm expecting that around the middle here will get sanded first, and then gradually the rest of the neck. So let's have a look. Yep, just as I suspected. That high spot I know is here, is getting sanded first. These parts are untouched, but we'll get to them. Okay, so now we go through higher grits of sandpaper. And we just get our fretboard up to a shine. I've got a smaller block here, which is the same radius, 12-inch. This is just an absolutely lovely piece of wood. Look at that gorgeous thing. Okay, and that's going to be a real pleasure to play. Now, just to see if our slots are deep enough, I've hammered in a tiny little bit here of test fret, which has gone in with no trouble at all. So that tells me I've checked the depth of the slots consistently, and that tells me that the frets shouldn't have a problem going in here. Okay, let's get on to it. Now these original Teisco frets really narrow. If I measure them with calipers, I get about 1.6 millimeters. And I'm going to replace the wire, but I'm not going to go that thin. I'm not going to go for perfectly vintage correct wire. What I've got here is wire which is 2 millimeters. And this is actually stainless wire. The serial number is FWSS6230, and it's a stainless wire, which means it won't need to be replaced as much. It's pre-bent to the correct radius, which is 12. So all I need to do is cut the pieces to the right length, finish the edges and undercut. Now we round off the edges of our fret. And this creates what's known as hemispherical fret ends. Now all of this leaves us with a fret which is a perfect fit for the board. The ends of the fret don't protrude, but they just go onto the binding. In order to make sure that we don't get any fret sprout, I'm going to take my water-thin super glue and just put a tiny bit here. And that's one perfect fret in place, 21 to go.